Hey there, everyone. I'm Raymond Lee, the host of Clocking Out. This podcast, it was born from a deeply personal place. Like many of you listening, I've experienced those moments where you look at your career and you think to yourself, there has to be more than this. Those crossroads we all experience, they're hard. We tend to stay safe, feeling stuck, then taking that leap of faith. Clocking Out is dedicated to my mom, who showed me what courage really looks like when she took her own leap of faith to pursue career fulfillment. Her journey inspired me to find my own career path and now to create this space where we can explore other people's stories together. My hope here is that our guests might illuminate something in your own path, whether you're contemplating a major change or you're just simply looking for more meaning in your work. Either way, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dakota Barker to our Clocking Out community. Dakota lives in Ontario, Canada, and she's a real estate investor, a competitive figure skater. She's a wife, a mom, who's on a personal mission to build generational wealth and empower others to do the same. Dakota made a major pivot from the medical profession as COVID had a significant impact on her career, which led her to leaving the field altogether. She discovered that real estate investing was the perfect vehicle to combine her passion for financial freedom with her deep desire to help others. Dakota shares her story, which to me is so relatable in so many ways. So without further ado, please enjoy Dakota Barker and her Clocking Out story. Dakota, welcome to the podcast. It's so nice to see you.
I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. I was spending the last few weeks looking at your background and sort of the journey that you went on from where you started college to the career you had in healthcare to where you are today. And entrepreneurship is the word that I keep coming back to. And it's so interesting because you created this identity in healthcare that I think oftentimes people who work in healthcare really struggle to get out of healthcare if they really want to, because it's the identity that they create. And you had a pivot that I feel like was so radical. And we're not going to jump there, but I really think that people who are in a career that is just not fulfilling to them, they're really going to enjoy your story. So
I hope so.
Just really delighted to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's definitely a journey, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But I hope it does inspire people to kind of rethink their situation if it's not for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dakota, I'd like to start with getting to know you, where you're from, maybe what your parents did for a living, and we can go from there.
Yeah, so I'm from a small-ish city in Northern Ontario. So I'm in Canada. And growing up, my parents were, I'm kind of from like an entrepreneurial family. So it's not that crazy, I guess, what I'm doing right now. It's definitely out of the comfort zone, I think, of my parents, but it's not a complete switch from how I grew up. My dad was always a salesman, so he did different types of sales growing up. So I saw a lot of kind of what sales required. I did door knocking with him when I was little. I remember getting chocolate bars when I would go to random houses with my dad doing some door knocking. So that was sort of instilled in me very early. My mom's a stay-at-home mom. So my dad did well in sales, so my mom was able to stay home with us. But what my mom did was she would create a business basically around what allowed her to stay home with us. So when we were a bit older, she created a daycare. So when kids normally go to daycare, she created one and had, some family members, some neighbors. She took care of their kids during the day. So that way that she could stay home with us. So that's kind of what my parents did. And then myself as a kid, I have some interesting entrepreneurial stories from when I was a child. So obviously I did have that influence from my parents, who were a bit more in the entrepreneurial mindset. And I have very vivid memories of doing the like lemonade stand thing when I was a kid.
Mm.
But I always wanted to be a little bit different. So I did the lemonade stand, realized that a lot of kids were doing that, and was like, okay, well, what else can I do to, make money? What else can I do from like an entrepreneurial perspective? So I probably, my mom didn't love this, but I would go into her garden and like clip flowers and sell flowers on the side of the road. And I remember she had these like big amethyst rocks. And I went and like chipped chunks of amethyst off of this rock and sold that on the side of the road. So I, from a young age, had that entrepreneurial side of me, but it took a while to allow that to resurface. And I have some thoughts on kind of where that came, like why that had to resurface, why that got kind of diluted. But yeah, that's how I grew up.
I'm curious, when you were younger, I guess two-part question. One is, what did you want to be when you grew up? And did your parents have influence over you to go a traditional route?
Boy, when I was younger, I remember one of the earliest kind of careers that I wanted was to be a vet, which is hilarious because I am very allergic to animals. So obviously that probably wasn't going to work ever in my favor. But I think that was very much from like a position of nurturing. I think as the older sister in the family, I grew up kind of nurturing my younger brothers. I've always loved animals. I had a big interest in biology as well. Like that was my undergrad. So the medical piece, I think, was always there. And as far as my parents, they didn't really push any of us in a certain direction. It was just get an education of some kind. So there wasn't you have to go to university, you have to go to college, we want you to be a doctor, lawyer, a high prestige career. They just said, get an education. Other than that, make sure that you're happy. So I'm lucky in that way. And I think it does come from having entrepreneurial parents, but there wasn't really a big uncomfortable push to go in a certain direction. The decision to do my undergrad and go into medicine was entirely my own.
You pursued an education, you followed a certain career path, and then at some point you decided to pivot into something completely different. And I just wonder, as you reflect back, if there was any sort of influence, it could have been super subtle, that caused you to go into the medical profession versus going right into what you're doing today.
So I have reflected back on this because I've thought about the fact that I had such an entrepreneurial spirit as someone so young. Where did that transition into something more traditional? And I on my reflection, I think it was less my parents and more of a kind of general how I perceived what I should do based on what kind of society had told me that I should do. You go to school and you have career days and you're asked, what career do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want your profession to be? I remember taking those like quizzes, I think in like grade 10, put in your personality and we'll show you what job you should have when you grow up. So I don't know if it was as much my parents, but more like me perceiving what kind of society thinks I should do. I knew from a young age that I wanted to do something that was maybe was a little bit different than everybody else. And I still haven't really pinpointed what that thought process was when I was little, but I always knew that I wanted to do something that was out of the ordinary from what everybody else was doing. And I think in my brain at that time, I thought medicine is something that not everybody will and can do. So if I do that, that's going to make me different. And that's going to
Mm.
make me sort of like doing something like exceptional, which didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to. But I don't think it was my parents pushing us in a certain direction. I think it was more of what I thought society, like what you were supposed to do, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
And so when was the moment when you decided that medicine was going to be the field? And then what was your decision points to start to pursue that in terms of college and education?
So it's interesting. I don't know what having a kid does to you, but I've done a lot of self-reflection since I've had a kid, and I've kind of thought about how I ended up in medicine and what that path looked like and kind of what my thought process was at the time. So I will start kind of with high school. High school, I had an interest in the sciences. I took sciences all the way through. Biology was my favorite. So I ended up doing my undergrad in biology. Again, I think societal pressure where I had good grades. I was, had top of my class, graduated with honors. So it was, if you're doing those things, you go into one of those kind of respected careers. So went into biology, didn't really know at that time what I wanted to do with biology. I just knew that it interested me. So I dabbled in pharmacy, thought that may be the direction. Thought about medicine, obviously. And then when I was in my last year of my undergrad, I started, making those kind of finalized decisions. What's next? Now I have to make a decision. I still haven't really finalized anything. And I was like, you know what? We go into medicine. That's what we do. I've done biology. I did well. I have good grades. That's what we do. We go into medicine. But I was thinking about this recently. For medical school, you have to write the MCAT to get into most programs. Right. I didn't want to write the MCAT. So now reflecting back on that, if I wasn't even willing to write the MCAT, did I really want to go into medicine? So I've started kind of questioning that decision at that point. But I didn't want to write the MCAT. I applied to the one university that didn't require the MCAT, didn't get in, was like, that's fine, whatever. And then decided that I would become a physician assistant instead. It was a new career path in Canada. I know in some other countries, especially the US, it's a very popular profession to go into. But in Canada, it was relatively new. A friend of mine said, hey, you should check out this profession. I'd never heard of it before, researched it. The applications were due in a week, threw in an application. So literally found out about the career, did like a day of research, threw in an application, got an interview, got in, and there I was becoming a physician assistant. So there was very little thought process, I guess, put into it. Medicine interested me, but as far as becoming a physician assistant, it was like a 2-week decision period. And then I was on my way.
It sounds like you knew you wanted to work in the industry and you were trying to take the path of least resistance to get the diploma that you needed to ultimately get you a job in the working world where you can start your career. And in helping people was something that ultimately you wanted to do. But, I mean, kind of thinking back, do you have any regrets in terms of what you chose?
I don't think I have regrets necessarily. And I don't really like having regrets because it all ultimately ended up leading me to where I am right now. Because with my career as a physician assistant, I ended up moving to a new city and because of that, I met my partner. And because I met my partner, we are where I am now. So I don't necessarily regret the decision that I made. And I actually did really enjoy being in medicine. Obviously, there were parts of it that I didn't enjoy because I'm not doing it anymore. But that nurturing, and I think you said helping people, that was a big part of what I wanted to be able to do, was help people. And that's always been a part of me since I was young, nurturing my brothers. So that part was fulfilled by medicine. There were other pieces of it that weren't necessarily fulfilled, but I definitely don't regret going into medicine. I also have some weird, cool medical knowledge that I can throw out every once in a while now. So no, I don't regret it. I did enjoy the time that I was there. Being in a medical program taught me a ton of discipline. It gave me some new skills that I was actually able to bring over into the entrepreneurial world. So I don't regret it. I wouldn't go back and redo what I did. I would do it the exact same. But I am happy to not be doing it anymore.
Yeah. Well, we're going to dig into that part of it, but I am wondering, for people who are, let's say they're working in the medical field and are interested in making a pivot. You mentioned transferable skills. You picked up some skills that you were able to bring forward into the entrepreneurial next phase of your career. And I wonder if you can share some examples of those skills that you were able to really hone and that have played themselves forward.
Yeah, for sure. So in the entrepreneurial world, I think the biggest thing that I've found to be transferable was people skills.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in medicine. You're working as a team. So you're constantly communicating. You're making sure that things are getting done, that you're communicating clearly. The other thing that you're doing often is talking to patients. So you're building rapport with them and you're essentially negotiating constantly. And building that rapport and negotiating, and basically, we'll call it, people might not like this, but you're essentially selling something to that patient, right?
Mm.
And sales is such a bad, people get freaky when they hear the word sales, but all you're really doing is figuring out what's best for that patient and kind of showing them why it's best for that patient and showing them, this is why we're going to go in this direction. And those are sales skills. So I was able to take building that rapport, clear communication, and those, that method of sales and negotiation, and bringing that into the entrepreneurial and sales world. And I think that's really helped me on the entrepreneurial side, because now I can ask those open-ended questions. I can really dig into, what does that person want? What do they need? What are their goals? And figure out what the best case scenario is for that person, to make sure that they're getting what they want out of the interaction that we're having. And I tell this because I do some coaching in the real estate world, and I tell this to anybody who is a medical professional or in the healthcare profession when they are doing some stuff in the real estate world, is use those skills, use that ability to build incredible rapport with people, use that ability to ask really good open-ended questions and diagnose what that person needs so that you can offer them something that makes sense for them. So to me, that's the biggest transferable skill that I've seen from the medical world into the entrepreneurial world. And then obviously there's things like, discipline and that kind of stuff. Medical school, any kind of medical school, is not an easy thing to go through. So having that, that discipline, that get stuff done, that, achieve kind of mindset, that's always going to be helpful as well.
Dakota, I love that example. I feel like you took your job to the next level. As you were just describing how you're treating patients, they're almost like clients to you, with like a passion and care that I would imagine other nurses or physician's assistants who, show up at a hospital or a clinic. They're going through the motions. The person has a name, the patient has a name, but, to some people, they may be a number. And, they're just sort of in this kind of grind. And what you just described is almost, you were setting an example for people who are really wanting to like take themselves to the next level. But I just love that example and just the discipline and how you're treating patients with like they're a client. I really love that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that may have been part of my burnout in medicine almost,
Mm,
because not everybody does it that way. And when you're that passionate about it and you really like you're there to truly help that person, unfortunately, sometimes medical systems and you kind of gets lost in the systems of the hospital sometimes.
mm,
But I am very proud of that. Like I said, I'll say it over and over again. I'm at my core there to help people, there to nurture. And that's what I wanted to do in medicine. And that's what I now do as an entrepreneur.
mm. I'm fascinated by that. Can you share a little bit more about how the healthcare system drove you to clock out? Like, what was it about the infrastructure, the bureaucracy, or even um, the I'm going to just generalize here, but there are for-profit institutions, and so I just wonder, like, what was it specifically that drove you to want to
Mhm.
move into another career direction?
There were a lot of things that happened at once. If you look back to when I left, you'll realize that it was right in the middle of COVID. So that was a big player in the reason for leaving. The Canadian health system is already we already have a lot of shortages. So pre-COVID, we already have too few people doing the jobs that they should be doing. We don't have enough staff to begin with, and that unfortunately creates a very negative environment often. So if you have a ton of people who are very burnt out, who are doing a lot of overtime, who are getting called in for extra shifts, um, that already creates a lot of burnout. And when someone's burnt out, they're not the most positive person coming to work. I experienced that myself. So that was already in place before COVID happened. And then we got hit with COVID. I was at a teaching hospital, so we had residents that had to go back to maybe the hospitals that they were normally at. We had fellows from other countries who were getting called back to go to the country that they were from. So we were left with a very skeleton staff to be doing, the work that we needed far more people to be doing. So
Mm,
you have that piece of it. And of course, during COVID, there was it was scary, right? The patients are scared. The hospital staff is scared. We don't really know. We're coming to work. We're not really sure what's going to happen. Are we going to get really, really sick just by going to work every day? So there was that sort of fear component to it. And then there were new rules that were put in place in the hospital that were changing a lot. And, I completely understand during something like COVID, we're just making the decisions that are best for the situation that we're in with the knowledge that we have. And I completely understand that. I was working with a very special population. I was working in childhood cancer. So these are patients that, stay in the hospital for a really long time. If they're there, they can be there for 6 months. So there were rules that came in that kind of didn't really make sense with that population. But because they were like a blanket rule for the hospital due to the situation with COVID, that was the rule that we had to follow. And there were just things that were happening that didn't really make sense for our patients, but we couldn't really do anything about it because it was a blanket policy. And that's where the, treat the patient kind of thing, make sure that the patient is getting what they need, especially from like a mental health perspective with the situation that we were in. So all these things together ended up leading to burnout for me. So it wasn't necessarily one thing that happened. It was kind of a snowball effect over the years pre-COVID that were really surfaced during COVID, and with some new stressors added in there. So that's sort of the story of my burnout and what ended with me leaving the medical world. Yeah.
Well, so I appreciate you sharing that. I feel the emotion and also the pull that you experienced while you were working in the medical field. And I was just thinking about people who are working in some job today, whether it's in medicine or in any position. There could be a security guard or traffic control where, there's high pressure moments, there's to some degree a high level of stress depending on what the day-to-day entails. But my question for you is, and I think this is one that so many people grapple with, is when is the moment when it's the straw that broke the camel's back? It's it's that moment where, like, how much burnout do you have to experience in order for you, like, what is rock bottom? When is that moment? I hate to be so dramatic about it, but you had described this starting before COVID. And so all of these things were sort of mounting, and I feel like the weight of this on your shoulders was like massive. And now you're presented with COVID that goes a few years. And so I just wonder, like, how did you decide, and how long did it last, and how much pain did you endure before you decided enough's enough?
Yeah. So my personality is very much, and this probably comes from being a competitive athlete as well growing up. I don't quit anything very easily. On a smaller scale, if I'm reading a bad book, I have to finish it. If I've started it, I'm going to finish it. When I was in my undergrad, I think I ended up with like 4 jobs at one point because I didn't want to quit any of them, because that would mean I'd have to quit. So my personality does not let me quit things very easily, sometimes to my own detriment. Having 4 jobs in my undergrad was not ideal. I did end up leaving a couple of them, so it did happen. But when that comes to my job as a physician assistant, if I have a bad book that I can't finish, never mind something that I've done 6 years of schooling. I've now practiced in this for 6 years. This is the career path that I was on. It was very hard to leave. So I took on a lot and just kind of thought, this is what a career is. You're going to have low points. It's going to be hard, but you push through it. There were things that I still liked about medicine. So that, like, I liked dealing with patients. I liked being able to help people. So that was still very fulfilling. But there was definitely that side of me that was like, something's not right here. I'm getting fulfilled on one half. The other half is really, it's not going well. So I tried pretty well everything I could to not leave medicine. There were a lot of discussions with the manager I had at the time. I ended up going on a stress leave to see if that would help. Saw a psychologist to see if that would help. So I took a lot of steps to try to not leave the profession. But when I realized that I was really done was after I went on my stress leave. When I went back, and even I did a slow return back to work, I still, I would sit in my car and have to, I would cry before I walked into the hospital. And that was like how I would start the day. And at that point I was like, it's not worth it. It's not worth my mental health. I was coming home and I was not nice. I was not a nice person to be around. My husband will tell you that I was far more snippy than I normally am. So I wasn't a nice person at home. I tried my best to be a nice person at the hospital. But it wasn't worth it. And when I started thinking about this as a long-term career, and if things are just going to get worse, I don't want to be that person that's not fun to be around when I get home. I don't want to have a family that I don't want to see when I walk through that door. So when I started thinking about those things and where the future was going to be, I didn't like how that looked. So that was where, for my own mental health, then also for the mental health of everybody around me, that was it.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that and being so vulnerable with sort of what you were experiencing and the emotion that you were experiencing. I feel like it's so relatable to people because work is hard, careers can be very difficult, and I think a lot of people get to a place, and there's a book I want to share that I read a few years ago by Annie Duke, who is an American former poker player, and she wrote a book called The Science of Quitting. And it's so interesting, Dakota, because what you just described is what she described and brought to life in her book was this tumbleweed that when a tumbleweed rolls, it gets bigger and bigger and accumulates more stuff. And so the visual I have is your career started as this little tumbleweed that got bigger and bigger. And she describes in her book that people don't quit because there's a stigma. And people like yourself who are very competitive, they persevere, they double down, they grind it out, they will make it work to the nth degree. And that making it work caused the mental health a lot of pain. And you pushed yourself to the limit, to the point where you said, I can't do this anymore. And I feel like so many people who do clock out of a situation push themselves to that break point. And some even go beyond, where they turn to substance abuse and other things that then medicate or mask those feelings and emotions, which take people to a deeper place. And so I love the snippety comment. I think you were being nice to your husband, but
I was doing my best. I'm
are.
not I try my best not to be a mean person, even when I am frustrated, but it wasn't the person that I wanted. It wasn't how I wanted to feel. And it wasn't the person that I wanted everybody else to see. It wasn't who I was.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. And like I said, it's so relatable to people who, if you're in that moment, that there's another choice to make.
Yeah.
And there's another path to go. And while quitting, I bet the moment that you just made the decision, that moment where you're sitting in the parking lot and you're like, this is the last tear I'm going to shed over this. And you said to yourself, I am going to make a change. I can only imagine that when you put in your notice, you tell me, how good did it feel to leave that behind after all of that?
It's interesting because I was a little torn still. I was very, I was relieved, obviously. I wasn't going to have what I've now understood are the Sunday scaries. I didn't know those were a thing. I was definitely experiencing them, but I didn't know there was an official term for them. So I was, I wasn't going to have to experience that anymore. I knew my mental health was probably going to get better. There was still a part of me, though, that was thinking about the patients, because there were people that I had been seeing, again, with the population that I was caring for. You get to know them really well because they come in for treatment. There were a couple patients that had been in the hospital for 6 months, a year. So you see these people every day for 6 months. And there's a part of me that was sad that I wasn't going to kind of see their treatment through, and wondered, how are they going to do? Like, there's still patients that I think about and wonder what happened to them, how they did. So part of me was sad that I wasn't going to see their treatment through and kind of be there for them, because just with the nature of my role, I ended up being a big support person for a lot of these people that are in hospital for a long time. So I worried about them a little bit and wondered how that was going to go, and was hoping that they were going to be okay. But obviously, from a personal perspective, it was a huge relief. So there was a bit of both. And like I said, I still think about those patients and wonder what happened to them even now, many years later. But yeah, overall, definitely a relief. It felt good.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I feel like as you were just describing that, I was thinking of a manager or an executive who has a team of employees. And one of the struggles they have with leaving, say, a corporate job is their team. And are the employees going to be okay if I move on? And I love how that people component of your passion really comes through there, and it makes you human of who you are. Like, if you didn't say that, you would just be in it for a job. And the fact that you feel that way about your patients really exemplified how much you cared for them and how close you got to know them.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. I would say the one thing moving out of healthcare and into what I'm doing now is knowing that I could still help people. And it did take a while to kind of figure out what that was going to look like, because it's so clear when you're in medicine how you're helping somebody, right? You're there, they're a patient of yours, you're treating them. So it was so clear to me how I was helping people. And when I moved over to be more on the entrepreneurial side, there was that, okay, but how is this going to fulfill that side of me that I was so passionate about? How am I going to be able to help people? So it did take me some time to kind of step back and realize that. But now, knowing that I am still able to help people is just a different way, that's kind of filled that hole for me.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that a little bit, because here you are, you spent decades in healthcare, you got an undergraduate degree, you got a graduate degree. I mean, this was your identity. And now you're no longer doing healthcare. You realize that I'm not going to be a physician's assistant. COVID was the catalyst to you hitting that point where you decided this is it. But you did a complete 180 in terms of the career you chose. And how in the world did you do that? And did you start building skills while you were working in healthcare? Like, tell me about that transition.
So I was very lucky when I got to the point that I needed to leave medicine, because my husband and I had already been building this business on the side, of doing real estate acquisitions, management. We were doing some house flipping at the time, we're not really doing that piece of it anymore. But we had already started building this business on the side. And that's what it was really supposed to be, was a side gig. I actually remember the first seminar that we went to, I had no interest in going because I was pretty fresh out of school. I was at that time relatively happy in the career that I was in. My husband said, hey, there's this real estate investing seminar that I would like to go to. Do you want to come? And I said, absolutely not. That sounds awful. That sounds boring. I have no interest in doing real estate, and I'm happy in my job. And it's my Saturday. It's nice out. I'm not wasting it in a room that I'm not interested in being in. But I was still am, a big HGTV nerd. So I liked Trading Spaces was kind of the one when I was a bit younger that I really liked. So I really enjoyed watching those, home renovation shows and the adding value and that kind of stuff. So that always really intrigued me. And he told me that one of the stars from one of the shows was going to be there. I said, that's different. You have now changed my mind. I will be there to get my picture. Thank you very much. So I went on a Saturday on a warm spring day to sit in that air-conditioned room and learn about real estate investing to get that picture with that person. And what I didn't realize was going to happen was I was going to really enjoy the concepts that they were teaching and really understand it. So I've always had, again, this is my entrepreneurial piece kind of resurfacing, right? So that entrepreneurial piece kind of started creeping in. I really like math. I've always been pretty strong in mathematics. So they were showing, the logic behind real estate, the math that's involved in it, the investment side of it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this makes so much sense. So I also really like logic and reason. It does very well with my brain. So I'm sitting there and I realized that this is something we're going to do. So from there, we started building our business, and we were about 3 or 4 years, I think, into this real estate investing side business. And it was pretty successful. Things were going well. So knowing that I kind of had that in the background that I could build, that also, I think, helped the transition to leave medicine. So that was something, those were skills that we were building while we were working, not really with the intention necessarily of leaving, especially when we did, but we were building those skills before I left my job.
Wow. I love that. Making a choice, you could deny the opportunity. And I love how you were honest in that it wasn't at all to learn about real estate investments, but it was to get this picture with this famous person.
Yep.
And so I love the fact that you made a choice. We can make choices every day. And I think a lot of people sometimes choose not to be bothered, choose the path of least resistance, and not think that there could be something there. And I love how that something that ended up being a reality was not at all what you initially intended. Did you get the picture?
I did get the picture. And it's funny because my real estate journey has, from like a professional perspective, has brought me very close to, like, I'm not friends with this person, but I have we have similar friends now. So I joke that, I started just wanting this picture and now we have friends in common. So it's funny how that ends up happening. Yeah.
That's great. So what have you learned through this journey in terms of leaning into entrepreneurship? You have started this business, which you can tell me about in a little bit. But what have you learned about this transition and this new career that you're in today that you can share?
Oh, I say we because it was both myself and my partner. My partner actually also left his job. He was in an IT job. So that's why I say we, because we both left very close together, which was an extra layer of excitement and scary all at once.
Yeah.
But we've learned so much. I've learned so much. I remember the moment that we left our jobs, because a lot of people ask us, when do you know that you're ready to leave your job to do real estate investing full time. And I honestly, I don't know if I would advise them to leave when we did, because we weren't in a comfortable position with our real estate investing quite yet. We were building to that, and we had the vision that that's where we were going to be, but we definitely weren't there when we left. But we knew we had some reserve funds that we could sort of live off of as we were building. And the thing that we had said to each other was, we won't let ourselves fail. And no matter what, we're going to figure it out. So with that sort of mindset, that's what allowed us to leave. We were both making six figures at the time and left to make zero figures.
Wow.
But that confidence in ourselves, we had built the knowledge, and we were ready to hustle. We were ready to figure it out. The other thing that we had learned kind of before we left and was really amplified after we left was how many different ways you can actually make money. You don't have to be in a job to make money. We did things like, we had a house with a bedroom that we weren't using. So we're like, we'll Airbnb that bedroom. We had a garage that we weren't using. We'll rent out that garage because we have this space. Why don't we use it? So we kind of figured out other ways to make money. We started doing some coaching in the real estate world because we had already done multiple deals, had the experience. So we did that piece. And what we realized we were doing was creating those multiple sources of income that people talk so highly of. So we really learned that you don't have to have a traditional job to make money. There are so many other ways that you can make money. And it actually put us in a very different mindset where having those multiple sources of income, if we end up losing one, we still have multiple others. And actually, side note, really appreciating those multiple sources of income, I would have been laid off from my job if I had stayed another month.
Wow.
So all of the PAs in the hospital ended up getting laid off. I think it was a month or two after I left. So that really gave me a whole new perspective where I thought my job was so stable, right? I'm a medical professional in the middle of COVID. I have the most stable job you could possibly have. And I would have been laid off 2 months later. So knowing that, and then learning how to create multiple sources of income and that you don't have to rely on a job, that allowed me to appreciate those multiple sources of income so much more, and made me realize how having one source of income can be terrifying, because I would have immediately, without preparation, lost my one source of income. So,
Wow, that's a cool story. I think it's not a wake-up call, but I feel like it's so with that story. There's two things that I think about when you shared that story of potentially losing your job. If you would have just stayed on, you would have lost your job if you stayed on. The two things that I thought about that people can take away from what you just shared is, one, creating a side hustle or creating something on the side as your career evolves, thinking about what is something that you can do outside of the work that you do, that if you were to do something on your own where you could make money. Like, I love how you just described, you could do all kinds of things to make money, whether it's real estate, whether it's creating something, selling something online, coaching, services. And I love that you started this business years before, because that became your thing once you recognized that it was time to make a move. And oftentimes people will say, oh, but I don't have enough time in the day. I was listening to a podcast a couple years ago. Tony Robbins was on a podcast with Gary Vee, and he talked about the 80-20, where you figure out how do you do your job in 80% of the time, and not necessarily working less time, but you do your job and then you create 20% of capacity for you to just do a little bit of something. And then in your case, over 3 years, your real estate business is now something substantial, of significance. And it sort of becomes a thing that you could make your thing. And what it does is it gives you options. And I love how you you made that your thing. And then ultimately, as you reflect back, if you hadn't done anything, you would end up losing your job and have nothing.
Yeah. So I coach a lot of people who have full-time jobs and are getting into the real estate world. And they tell me that all the time. I don't have time. I don't have time to do this. Which there are people who are very busy. The thing that I always remember is that everybody has the same hours in the day, right? Like I don't have more hours than someone else that's working a full-time job. The most successful people in business don't have more hours in the day. They were just very intentional with what they did with the hours that they have. So you have to make those decisions. One of my mentors tells this story about this guy who made a vision board. I think it was a vision board, and he put it in front of his TV. And every time he has to watch TV, the idea is now he has to move like his goals and his dreams to the side in order to watch TV. I'm not saying that watching TV is a bad thing, but be very intentional with the time that you do have, and you'll probably realize that you have more time than you think you do if you are very intentional with the time that you have.
I love that. That is such a great example. I've never heard that before. And for people who retreat to the couch at the end of a workday to binge watch something on Netflix or Amazon, putting a vision board, a whiteboard that has your dreams and your goals listed there, I think is a fantastic idea. It's the reality of that.
Yeah,
it's
aggressive.
So true.
It's aggressive, but if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do, right? If it means, if something means that much to you, you're going to figure out a way to do it. You're not going to find excuses. So if you're not doing it, you either haven't found your reason why you're doing it, so your why isn't strong enough to push you, or you actually don't care that much about it.
So tell us about the company you and your partner have today.
Yeah, it's I get very excited talking about this part because this has been our baby since I think we started this back in 2018. So we've been in the business for a couple of years now. We acquire and manage multifamily assets. So very different than what I was doing before. But basically, we're looking in the multifamily space. So we'll buy apartment buildings. We have everything from a duplex, which was sort of some of our older projects, up to a 24-unit property, and we're building another 15 units on it. So we have multiple units that we own and are under our management. And what we do is acquire these with partners. So if someone wants an opportunity to be able to get into the real estate world, but they're not really sure how, we partner with them, and with the knowledge that we've gained, we acquire that asset with them. So, and then manage it afterwards. So that's where I was talking about how am I going to help people in the real estate world? Because it seems so different than medicine. It's not as obvious how you're helping somebody. But what I've realized is the real estate world offers such an amazing opportunity to build wealth, and so few people know how to tap into it. I didn't know until I went to that seminar where I wanted my picture taken. I had no idea that real estate was out there. I just thought it was for those, the big guys, the multi-millionaires that acquire the big tall buildings. That was for them. What I've realized is that average people can also tap into that real estate market if they know how to do it. And that's knowledge that we've acquired. And I get to help people tap into that market and build the wealth that they want to build for their families, for the next generation. Maybe it's passing it down to they have a favorite charity or something like that. That's what I get to help them do. And then the other side of it is also being a housing provider. So not only do I get to help people build wealth, but we really pride ourselves in how we manage our buildings. And we really, again, care for the people that are in our units and want to, provide them a beautiful place to live and a safe place to live. So we get to provide housing to people in our communities, and we get to help people build wealth through real estate at the same time. So that's how I get to take that desire to help people and move it over into the real estate world.
I love that. That's great. I love that you're doing the work that you feel like you are called to do. You're still helping people. You're providing homes for people to not just live in, but grow and pursue their dreams. And so I think I love that.
Yeah, it's been very fulfilling. I know I don't like to use the word landlord because, again, that has such a negative connotation to it. But it's amazing being able to provide housing that we know, like, it's somewhere that I would live, right? We make sure that our units are a standard that are safe, that's something that I would live in. So being able to provide that housing is special. And then, like I said, being able to help people tap into an ability to build wealth that honestly most people don't know about. They just know that rich people buy real estate and that's how they build the majority of their wealth. But they have no idea how that, as like an average person, they can also do that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Dakota, I really appreciate you spending time today and sharing your journey. It's so inspiring how you've transitioned from helping people in healthcare to helping people in real estate. You've kept the common thread around what you were called to do on this earth, and just really appreciate you sharing your journey. I think your story is absolutely relatable to people, and I know people are going to walk away with some great nuggets, examples of things that they can do as they're sort of thinking about and contemplating what they want to do in their career. So really appreciate you joining the podcast.
Thanks. It was a really great discussion. And I do hope that, there were pieces in there that if there's somebody that's in the same situation I was in when I was in medicine and just trying to figure out if there's something else out there, if there's a better situation, just to take the time to reevaluate what you're doing. It's hard. It's so hard to do that reevaluation, but it's so important, and, take that time to reflect.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, thanks again. And thanks everyone for listening. Until next time. Hello, everyone. It's Raymond again here. I want to take a moment and say a special thanks to our sponsor, Career Minds. They're a global provider of career transition and career development solutions. And if you like what you're hearing today, please click on the follow button and rate our show. Until next time, remember, if you're sitting there and you're stuck or just unsure of your career or future, and you really think it's time for a change, I would encourage yourself to ask these 3 questions. Does my career or work make me feel alive? And am I doing the things that genuinely matter to me most? Am I creating value for myself and for others around me? Until next time.